Hey there folks, it's Nick from Beyond the Specs, and welcome back to another episode of Through the Looking Glass. Now this is the Tokina 100mm macro, and we're going to be talking about it today because it's been an absolute war crush for us. So let's get down to it. So let's talk about the world of macro lenses for a second. Now macro lenses are used from everything from your favorite photo of a dewdrop on a flower, to tiny pictures of insects, to your favorite picture of an ice cube in some luscious Coca-Cola. And macro lenses are the Mac Daddy feature lenses in the world of product photography, nature photography, and beyond. But they've also have a place in the world of cinematography because they are great detail lenses. This Tokina 100mm macro has a unique position in the marketplace. It's one of the few PL lens options that has an incredible price. Now the world of macro lenses is really dominated by the very high-end set of ARRI master macros, and that range of focal length from semi-normal 60mm to all the way up to 200mm and beyond. They are massive lenses with very huge housings, and there's a rumor that those are actually based off a Nikon lens design, but we aren't here to talk about rumors because those lenses deliver. And if you're looking for a set of macros on a professional film set in various focal lengths and you need PL, those are the set that you typically go with. And now you can go a slight step down and opt for like the Cook macros or the IBE Optics macros, but still gonna be very high price tag. Now where the Tokina is interesting is that it's actually based on the Tokina still photo lenses, but now they offer in a fully contained cinema professional housing, and it's a PL mount. And we have this PL mount copy here. And for us, at my day job, we shoot a lot of product cinematography. We shoot a lot of food and beverage, and those require a lot of detail. And that's why this macro lens is the workhorse. At 100mm, it's our go-to macro lens because it allows us to have excellent separation and some really great focus on our subject. And it also renders a really nice shallow depth of field, and it's really lovely because of the bokeh. This Tokina lens is built solid. It's weighty, it's dense, and you feel like you're holding a heavy, dense piece of aluminum glass in your hands. Now the rings are a bit thick and they have some very heavy dampening on both the iris and the focus rings. But they have really nice hard stops, and that's what makes it pretty nice to use. What's interesting about Tokina's approach versus more high-end macros is that a lot of very expensive macros employ very rare and unique floating elements. Those floating elements actually work to correct the image and also correct the amount of light that is coming into your lens, so that the closer you focus, that T-stop doesn't actually change. So on an R8 T28 lens, it's actually 2.8 no matter where you choose to focus it. But on the Tokina lens, it's a little different, and what Tokina has done instead is that they've color-coded their focus marks and their aperture indicators. So when I adjust to 2.9 here, you can see that it's white. And if we look over to my focus marks, you can see that it becomes white at about 15 feet and beyond. But as I get closer and closer to focus, you can tell it goes to yellow, then pink, then blue, and that is the indication here on the actual light transmission that comes through. So when I'm at 17 inches, I'm actually at a T4, and it goes only up and up from there, going to like a 5.6 and even an T8. And even though I haven't actually changed my iris around or changed my aperture, that amount of light transmission is still going down. And that's kind of the compromise when it comes to this construction and this cost. But that cost is worth celebrating because this is a macro PL lens at $2,500. And the ARRI versions of this are at least $40K, and the Cooks, they're still north of $10,000. So for this price point at $2,500, that is incredible because you have a 100mm macro that performs well for most of the work we do, and we can always add more light, and that's why this lens is pretty astonishing. And you do lose a lot of those fancy elements inside of this lens that keep the level of light constant throughout the entire lens as you pull focus. But for the cost, we're willing to give that up on a lot of projects we do. So let's talk about performance, because we gotta say it's great to have a really nice macro lens. And every lens has its great qualities, but if it looks like you're shooting through Vaseline or it's a Gaussian grill effect, that's not really great for a nice close-up product shot where the details matter. And of course, the Tokina has some compromises, especially if you shoot wide open, because there's some chromatic aberration. But $2,500, you can only be so picky. And now, the lens design in this is a little bit outdated. It's the same kind of lens design you've seen from the last 10 to 15 years, but it's not as huge of a housing as those ARRI Master macros or those huge Cook lenses. And I gotta say, to have this compact of a lens is kind of neat. And I think that it shows that, the defects are expected when you shoot wide open from this. You have a little bit of pin cushioning, some chromatic aberration, high contrast scenes, etc. But once you stop this lens down, everything cleans up super nicely. And at T2.9, remember, you're gonna have a razor thin depth of field, so you're gonna end up stopping down pretty much all the time. Now, you also have to be careful because when you stop down, your exposure is changing. But remember, as you get closer and closer to your subject, your exposure is also changing because this Tokina lens doesn't have those fancy floating elements. And so when you're at a T5.6 or T8 and you're going closer and closer, you're actually going to be at a T16 and maybe a T32. So you have to keep your lighting in mind and be very intentional with how close you put your subject and how much depth of field you actually want. And so when we're in the field, we're usually shooting this in the sweet spot of like T4, T5.6, because in product photography, the details matter. And it's all about choosing how much of that focus falls off on your product. Do you want to see the front of the client to the back of the client, or do you want it all fall off in the background? And you want to see that nice depth of field, that nice bokeh behind you. So it's really about being intentional in your choices and intentional in your focus. Now, we can't talk about macro lenses without talking about its magnification, and this Tokina 100mm is a 1:1 magnification. And what does that mean? It means you can get some really sweet and creative detail shots of products. And that's why the amount of light you let in and how close you are to your subject plays a huge role, because if you're looking to get that really sweet close-up of an ice cube or some luscious Coca-Cola in a glass, you're going to want to get a lot of detail and you're going to see a lot in focus. So as you get closer and closer, remember that light transmission, it plays a factor. So it really comes back to how much light you're letting in and how close you want to be when you're deciding to shoot with this lens. But when you get into the sweet spots of this lens, it performs very nicely. We've shot some national TV ads, some national product shoots using this lens, and we've had some very discerning directors and agencies and brands, and they've had no complaints with what we've shot on this lens. And this lens has put out results that match and intercut very nicely with like Zeiss super speeds and ultra speeds, as well as some ARRI master primes. And the footage that this Tokina lens puts out matches and cuts in just fine with those. So I think that's where this lens holds a very unique position in the industry. A lot of people tend to flock to larger name brands because those names are typically associated with quality and consistency. But it's a big myth that you can't have the same great quality and a great value cinema lens. Because this is definitely a great value that holds up and holds its own when even intercut with the best of lens kits. And this lens brings a very solid performance, maybe a solid, weight to it, and maybe an outdated optical design, but I think you're gonna be more than happy with what this lens puts out at even the highest ends of cinema. Now, with that said, this was our very first macro lens that we secured for our studio because it was one of the few ones that are actually available to purchase new. But recently, the IRIX 150mm has been released, so be sure to check out a review of that lens, linked down in the description below. Now, thanks to some modern improvements in market, that 150 may give some smoother and premium bokeh than you get out of this Tokina lens, and we'll be doing a comparison that's also linked down below in the description. Now, long story short, this lens is a buy for us. If you're in the market for a PLL mount lens or a macro lens versus its faux component, you're not really picking up anything other than the build quality and the metal housing. So if you're just looking for a macro lens for a DSLR or a similar camera, I'd say save the money and just get like a Sigma or Nikon version of this lens. If you're looking for an option, the Nikon 105 f2.8 did outperform the Tokina as well as the Sigma Art Macro. The thing that goes for all these lenses is that when you stop them down to a certain point, you gotta split hairs to be able to tell them apart. And that's what makes this Tokina such an awesome buy, because if you're in the market for a PL mount macro lens, the Tokina just is a great value. But if you can only choose one between the IRIX and the Tokina, well, then you have to check out our comparison video linked down below. Now, once again, this is Nick from Beyond the Specs. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, subscribe, throw us your comments, throw us your questions, and show us what you'd like to see more of. So take care, guys. Keep on creating, and peace.